So thank you for choosing to be with us today. We know you have lots of choices of where you spend time, and we're delighted you chose to spend it with us. Today, we enter a new theme and a new month: rebirth, renewal, reawakening, refreshing, recreating, reinvention, however you want to say it, because we're always getting to reimagine ourselves in a way that maybe is different than what we did last week or last year or last month. So I'm going to start with a question, and I want you to think about it. Where in your life are you beginning again? And it's always been challenging to designate exactly when something begins. We live in a natural world of cyclic change. The seasons change, they follow each other, and it's more or less steady, right? And it's continuous. Roughly 2,000 years BCE, the Babylonians began to notice and document that the stars moved in the heavens in a predictable pattern, and it repeated so they could anticipate what was likely to happen next. And some prehistoric people had recognized springtime as the time of new beginnings, and thus the beginning of the new year. Truth be told, the people that survived the winter could once again forage for fresh food, and babies were born in their flocks. It was a Roman emperor by the name of Numa back in 700 BC who first suggested that January replace March as the first formal month of the year. It took 500 years for his suggestion to be implemented across the empire. It takes time sometimes, right? And then 200 years later, Julius Caesar came along and he recreated the calendar and complicated things crazy, but he kept January as the start of the year. He ignored, or he forgot, or he didn't ask his astrologers and astronomers about the actual rotation of the Earth around the sun. So after a few centuries, the calendar dates got all wonky with the dates that things occurred in nature. They no longer matched. So you'd have the notion of the beginning or spring or fall, and they would no longer line up with what the experience was. And in 1582, Pope Gregory XIII revised the calendar, correcting Caesar's errors, and dealt with the problem caused by the actual speed of the Earth's rotation, and added a leap day once every 4 years. And when I was thinking about this yesterday, it made me laugh because Pope Gregory made this adjustment to the calendar 50 years before Galileo was accused of heresy by the Inquisition for suggesting that the Earth rotated around the sun. I don't know, but that's what happened. Gregory made the adjustment to the calendar to make it accurate, or way more accurate. And then Galileo got in trouble for finding the science behind it. I don't understand. But even still, everybody didn't adopt this new calendar right away. It took 200 more years before the majority of the Protestant and the Orthodox nations of the earth started following this Gregorian calendar. Before that, their new year had started in late March, around the time of spring equinox, or Ostara, or the Protestant Christian resurrection day known as Easter. Ostara, Easter, who's to say, right? And some nations like China and Ethiopia both use their own calendar with their own beginning of the year, and also the Gregorian one, so they can communicate with the rest of us. And regardless of the specific details, we are all individually and collectively at the time of new beginnings. And it's not just springtime that calls this into creation. It's the recognition that this period of the pandemic is ending at some speed. And we're moving into a world more blatantly of our own creation. And we each get to decide how we want to be with ourselves and with each other after a relative period of isolation and maybe even introspection. And CSLT is also beginning to move from an online-only world to a hybrid one, with part of the community choosing to meet in person and part of it deciding that they will remain online only. Neither choice is wrong, they're just different. And we're moving into this new world of a new way of being for us. And there are dozens and dozens more decisions that each one of us makes almost constantly, whether we're aware of them or not. One of the things that makes science of mind such a challenging and worthwhile philosophy to work with is that no one can tell us exactly what the one and only right and true way is. And if you didn't notice, I put one and only right and true way in quotes, because each one of us gets to work out our way for ourselves. Each one of us is already of God, which is to say divine in nature. And we use our lives as humans to explore what that means for us and to express what that means for us. And we learn, usually by experience, what doesn't work. So from Dr. Holmes, from the Science of Mind text, page 383 and 384, no one judges us but ourselves. No one gives to us but ourselves, and no one robs us but ourselves. We need not fear either God or the devil. There is no devil, and God is love. When we make mistakes, we suffer the consequences. When by reason of enlightenment and understanding, we correct our mistakes, we no longer suffer from them. Understanding alone constitutes salvation, either here or hereafter. We need fear nothing from the universe. We need not be afraid of God. We may be certain that all arrive at the final goal, and not one will be missing. Every individual is an incarnation of God. The soul can no more be lost than God can be lost. We believe in God, and that is good. What more can life demand of us that we do the best that we can and try to improve? If we have done this, we have done well, and all will be right with our souls, both here and in the hereafter. This leaves us free to work out our own salvation, not with fear or even with trembling, but with peace and quiet confidence. It's a big job, and it is within our capabilities. And there's no right way or wrong way to do it. How amazing is that? So how do you choose to live? How do you choose to begin again? There's not a one of us that doesn't have history, not only our own personal history and our family histories and our cultural histories, and even that ever-present pervasive bias or tendency that exists from being a human on earth at this time. And we get to decide whether our lives are run by these historical belief systems or not. And I'm not saying they're all bad, because they're not. Some of them are quite useful and beneficial, and it's up to each one of us to decide which ones we keep, which ones we strengthen, and which ones we discard as not being terribly useful to us. Sometimes it seems like a lot of work, and it's hard to change our minds and begin again if we've bound ourselves up in the spoken and unspoken rules of our histories. And yet the only one that can free us is us. And if we wish to have a different experience than we've had in the past, we have to recognize we have the authority and the power in our own lives to make our own choices. And then we have to do it. We have to begin again and again and again and again. From Dr. Holmes, page 393, when a human makes a demand on themselves or upon the universe which flows through the self, they make a demand on the original mind and the original energy. Thus, their demand causes original mind and energy to produce certain specific things for them. This is a new creation, produced by the same creative force or energy that produces all things. The mind that humans use to conceive new ideas is the original mind of God. There are not two minds, only one. The universe and the individual are one essence. I'll let that sink in for a moment. The universal and the individual are one in essence. If we're afraid to choose because we don't want to make a mistake, we're using the mind of God to stay stuck. That's a choice we are at liberty to make. And we can choose at any moment a different possibility. And even a different one after that, if that other one didn't work out the way we wanted it to. Holmes continues on the bottom of 393 to the top of 394. No form is permanent. All forms return to the formless. The formless is eternal. And then he repeats himself, all form is temporary. There is an eternal play of life on itself. This is necessary that the mind be expressed. Humans are expressions of this in this original mind and can call temporary forms into being if they choose to. Indeed, they can't stop. So think about what this means. I mean, everything we create is temporary. No form, no physical experience, no idea, no thing that we make up is here forever. Everything changes. But what's behind that, the formless, is eternal. And we tap into the formless all the time. We can't stop it. It's our nature. This is that part of the foundations class that was so hard to imagine and understand, is we're always choosing. We're always deciding what we pick from that middle part of the teaching symbol, because we are always having ideas that manifest from the universe of possible ideas. And we are always bringing something into form. And we get to choose what that is. And we get to change our minds when we discover we didn't like what we picked the last time. This is part of the gift and the challenge of being human. And it's an ever-present reality for all of us. So this morning in the meditation, I used Jana Stanfield's song, If I Were Brave, as a journaling inspiration. What would you do if you were brave? Jana wrote this with some other guy, I've forgotten his name, in 2001. And I first heard it by an a cappella group called Four Bitchin' Babes, sometime shortly after that. You know the song, you've sung it yourself. I'm going to read you the lyrics, and I want you to think about what you would do if you were brave. Knowing we have this possibility to create, it's innate in each of us, and it is always active, whether we're creating history again, or whether we're creating something different for ourselves. We're always creating. We're always beginning again. The lyrics. What would I do if I knew I could not fail? If I believed, would the wind always fill up my sail? How far would I go? What could I achieve? Trusting the hero in me. If I were brave, I'd walk the razor's edge, where true believers dare to tread. I'd never lose faith, even when losing my way. What steps would I take today if I were brave? What if we're all meant to do what we secretly dream? What would you ask if you could ask anything? Like the mighty oak sleeps in the heart of the seed, really it's an acorn, are there miracles in you and me? You know there are. If I were brave, I'd walk the razor's edge, where true believers dare to tread. I'd never lose faith, even when losing my way. What steps would I take today if I were brave? If I refused to listen to the voice of fear, would the voice of courage whisper in my ear? Maybe this is what I'd hear. I am brave enough to move ahead, where true believers dare to tread. Never lose faith, even when losing my way. What step will I take today? I am brave. So how do we begin again and again and again? How do we remember that there's nothing we ever really fail at? Even when stuff goes horribly wrong, or we try something and discover we're not good at it at all, or things aren't as enjoyable as we expect them to be, what do? Hopefully, we choose again, and we begin again and again and again. So I want to close with two things: a piece from Dr. Holmes, from the Holmes Reader for All Seasons, and then a piece from Mary Oliver. From Dr. Holmes: you are as old as yesterday, as young as today, and as new as tomorrow. You are as old as last night's setting sun, as young as the dawn of today, and as new as your interest in living. You are as old as your fear of life, as young as your faith and hope, and as vital as your enthusiasm. You are as old as your memory of hurt, as young as your expectation of good, and as buoyant as your joy of accomplishing. You are as old as your doubts, as young as your dreams, and as strong as your convictions. So let the rising sun of this new day bring light and laughter into your life and guide you to your heart's desire. And then a poem from Mary Oliver. I've used this one before. It'll be familiar with you, as you and in you probably. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal body of yours love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain move across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, and the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the blue, clear air, head home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over again, announcing your place in the family of things. Take a breath, begin again and again and again, and create the life you imagine. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So I want to continue with the affirmative prayer, which is how we end the talk portion of the service. So if I've inspired you to claim some good for yourself, to claim some new beginning, some next step, that may be a stretch, hold that in your mind while I speak these words. I recognize that whole holiness that lives in as in me, in as and through each beloved, in as and through all of life. And I recognize each one has already been given the gift of choice, the gift of deciding, the gift of moving forward and choosing a reality different than the one they had in the past, if that is their wish. And I recognize this one life already as active, already giving of itself, already exploring and expressing and engaging in life in a new and different way. So I celebrate this opportunity to practice, to experience, to express, to explore. And I know that this life lives in me and lives in and as all. And so enjoy and delight in that feeling of the adventurer, the explorer, the experimenter. I move into this next reality with excitement, with anticipation, with joy, with delight, and knowing that good and more good is the reality that's been given. It beauty, order, peace, power, joy, delight. That gift already is available to me and to all. So I accept it, I allow it, I receive it, and I know it is already so, and so it is.